This is a response to a user, which I think is pronounced Yamikaiba, who responded to my video about what would it take to make it worth it. What I was saying in my original video is, you know, how great would the future have to be in order to justify how crappy the past has been and how crappy the world is right now. And I was basically signalling towards a kind of utilitarian measure, admittedly a slightly bogus one, where I think if you added up the total amount of suffering in the world between the beginning of life and now, and the total amount of pleasure in the world between the beginning of life and now, suffering would outweigh pleasure by a considerable margin. And meaningfulness, you know, and would far outweigh anything like meaningfulness, to the extent that, well, yeah, that's it really. How good would it have to be in the future in order to make that crude economics pay off, make any kind of sense? And Yamikaiba, I think, made a really great response where he kind of acknowledged that massive, I think, which, as I say, is slightly bogus utilitarianism, and introduced a different set of measures to complicate it a bit. And if I understand it correctly, what he's saying there is that that act of measurement, the utilitarian measure that we use to judge experiences as pleasurable or painful, or more subtle gradations in that, the methods by which we assign value to experiences are not kind of absolute. You know, they don't come outside of context. But and one of the contexts that assigns value to experiences is the process by which that experience is arrived at. So he cites this example of, I guess, kind of sorority groups, university groups, college groups being formed, and one group is, there's no barriers to entry, you're in a group and you're given access to a club room, and these people basically stand around in this club room thinking, well, what's this about then? It's crap, just a bloody club room, I don't want to stay here, and they all wander off. The second group have to go through complex and, in some cases I guess, slightly humiliating, maybe even painful rituals and ordeals, and make certain sacrifices and put a lot of effort into becoming a member of this group. And if they go through all these processes, then they're given access to exactly the same club room with exactly the same resources. But in that second case, suddenly this club room has acquired huge amounts of value. It's a very valuable place. They want to be there, they want to hang out together. It's treated as a meaningful commodity. And the only explanation for that, given that the club room itself is exactly the same, the only explanation for that is that value is being assigned according to the amount of sacrifice, suffering, or just effort that's gone into their being allowed access. Okay, so I think that's right. So to play that maths back across life on planet Earth, I guess it could be interpreted as what you're saying there, Yamikaiba, as you know, we should be looking around. I should be looking around at these trees, and occasionally I kind of can. Looking around this park and the sky and my dogs and other humans, and giving them a value according to the sacrifices, the effort, the suffering that's led to this situation. You know what I mean? I can acknowledge that there has been a lot of suffering, and there still is a lot of suffering, and there still is a lot of difficulty and effort and sacrifice. I can acknowledge that, but I would acknowledge, the way I would acknowledge it is by drawing value from that. This is the big clubhouse that I've been thrown in, and I can either say, oh, this is a shitty clubhouse, I don't want to be around here, there's nothing to do. Or I can say, look at all the effort that's gone into the making of this clubhouse. Look at the thousands and thousands and thousands of animals and humans and other things that have suffered and died. And look at the billions of years of effort that have gone into the creation of this. And try and draw value from that, I think is what you're saying. Yeah, I can kind of respect that. Kind of. And as I say, sometimes I do get that kind of a buzz from it. Most of the time I don't, but sometimes I do. I think the reasons why I sometimes don't, yeah, that's probably worth thinking about as well. One of the reasons, I think, is because I don't identify with those people. And this is what I mean by survivor syndrome in my original video. I don't feel that, and I perhaps should, that there's been this kind of communal effort that I am part of, that identity, my being kind of extends into those other suffering creatures, and that together we have made the effort. And yes, I've been one of the lucky ones, but it was a communal effort. We've done it together, and here we are, we've realised this. You know, a bit like what people say about baby boomer generation after the Second World War. You know, during the Second World War, apparently, there was all that kind of spirit of the Blitz stuff. Everybody was in it together, and yes, a lot of people got killed, but a lot of people didn't. And the survivors came out grateful and with a sense of value, of valuing the freedoms, valuing the state of the nation that it had arrived at, even though, you know, in this country, in the UK, we still had rationing until 1953, 8 years after the war ended. So even in that highly difficult time, apparently people valued their experience, valued the world that all that suffering and difficulty had created, presumably because they'd identified with the combatants. You know, they'd been involved in the war. But as I say, we're baby boomers. There's been no war in my generation, and there probably won't be a war on that scale again, which will unite us. So now if people make sacrifices on my behalf, I don't think that could have been me, or it's part of a grand sacrifice that we're all making. I just think, I didn't ask you to do that. I didn't ask you to make a sacrifice. That's my first response. I didn't ask you to lay down your life for me. That's your choice, which is a bit churlish, but I think that's much more the flavour of contemporary life than the kind of whole spirit of the Blitz. Some people die such that others might live, you know what I mean? And I think gaining value, you know, seeing the value of the environment by equating it with the amount of suffering or effort or sacrifice that's gone into the production of that environment only really works if you're identifying with those who suffered, if you're only identifying in a strong way with those who are making those sacrifices and undergoing those efforts. I think many of us, like me, are a bit churlish about that and just say, well, I didn't ask you to do that. I didn't ask you to evolve. I didn't ask you to cower in a ditch while another animal ripped your throat out. It's your choice. What a bunch of bastards.